Welcome, everybody, to Revolt Presents The Culture Speaks. I'm Kennedy-Rue McCullough, your host here in Atlanta, and we are so excited to be joining you here in studio for our live coverage of the Democratic National Convention. Joining me are my panelists for tonight's discussion, Jaden Williams, community activist, and board member of the Black Republican Council, Azad Ahmadi. Thank you guys both for being with us. And don't you worry, I know y'all looking for our girl Tez. She is actually on the ground live at the DNC, and we will be piping back and forth to her so we can see everything that's going on there. I want to jump right in, guys, and just talk about some of the highlights from the Democratic National Convention. I mean, so many things have been making waves all over our timelines, our communities, social media. And I think that it's important that we talk about all that stuff. A lot of things to highlight, but first and foremost, I know everyone was talking about the incredible speeches from the Obamas. Let's take a look at what the First Lady and former president had to say.
That's actually been getting worse now that he's afraid of losing to Kamala. There's the childish nicknames, the crazy conspiracy theories, this weird obsession with crowd sizes.
For years, Donald Trump did everything in his power to try to make people fear us. See, his limited, narrow view of the world made him feel threatened by the existence of two hardworking, highly educated, successful people who happen to be black. I want to know, who's going to tell him that the job he's currently seeking might just be one of those black jobs? She understands that most of us will never be afforded the grace of failing forward. We will never benefit from the affirmative action of generational wealth.
Now let's get into it, guys, because I feel like this is a completely different tone from, the past, which was they go low, we go high. Now I feel like it's they go low, we're just gonna call it out. So what do you both feel like needs to be called out for the respective political parties, in exploration of this whole election?
Yeah, so first, thank you for having us.
Of course.
But number one, I think it's very important for us to look at kind of what the Obamas were saying holistically at a full level. Mm-hmm. Although we just saw a clip, they went very more in depth into what they discussed as a party. Mm-hmm. It's certain things that, when Michelle Obama said, it's one of those black jobs, mm-hmm. you have to think about it. The Obama administration and straight into the Trump administration basically took a black job. So you're kind of looking at it and saying, okay, well, what is he going to do different? And we could tell that he just basically stripped a lot of the stuff. And we all know a president doesn't ever see the work in his tenure unless he's reelected. You always see it after 4 years. So really what we're looking at is just seeing a breakdown now of what Trump did when he was trying to really destroy the Obama legacy. And now we're seeing him wanting to do it again from the Biden legacy. So that's really what we have to look at when we break down from both parties. What is each party trying to bring to the table? And we're not looking at it for a now instance, but we're looking at it for a future instance.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder, how do you feel like the Obamas did in kind of laying their foundation and kind of proving their point, which was, Trump isn't for you guys? Do you feel like they accomplished what they were set out to accomplish?
I think the Obamas did what the Obamas always do, mm-hmm. and they appeal on the basis of emotion. Mm-hmm. Substantively, there was nothing in either of the speeches that they gave that discussed what the Democrat Party had accomplished in the last 16 years, nor what it was going to accomplish here going forward. The reality in this situation is that Democrats have been in charge relative to the presidential administration for the last 12 years. And the only time that I can recall Black Americans being satisfied with the social and economic policies of the presidential administration is during Trump's administration. So, what we see right now, I think, with their presence mm-hmm. at at the DNC is nothing more than the Democrat Party's press or leverage relative to getting support from black voters.
Interesting. I do want to bring up, something that Michelle said that was that really stuck out to me. I wonder if it was the same with all of you guys about, us not having the privilege of failing upward, of necessarily benefiting from affirmative action and these sorts of things that have, been under attack during the Trump presidency. So how did you feel about, what she said, and really what is like the subtext of what she's saying? Is she saying those protections for us to kind of follow our dreams and, pursue those loftier goals and ambitions might be threatened?
Yeah, I think the purpose of the Obama's speeches overall was to push their support, not to give the Democrat side of what we've done in the last 16 years. It's not to give what has been happening in the last administration, because that was not their administration. Hey, they're relaxing, right? They're in their mode. But what was strategic about it really is saying a lot of the things that we as Democrats or we as Black America, what we need to benefit in this country, is being taken away by the same Republican Party that multiple of their leaders have used on a consistent basis. And so for us to progress as a country, we have to acknowledge that, hey, these are the tools that can make us progress. This is what we can use to be successful. But the party that has been using it the most or has been benefited to is trying to take it away at the same time. So that's what they wanted to emphasize.
How would you respond to that?
I think it's a social fallacy, really. The reality is that since 1964, the Democrat Party hasn't accomplished anything relative to Black America. We have the Civil Rights Act today because the vast majority of Republicans voted for the Civil Rights Act, right? You got affirmative action under Republicans, The reality is that the outcomes of the socioeconomic policies that have been pushed by the party, to include the Obamas, have been relatively divisive for our community in particular. And we're seeing today, I think what we're seeing today is a lot of Americans waking up to the reality that the dream that was sold, right, doesn't come with the outcomes, the intended outcomes. And I'm not saying that to say that Democrats are all bad people and the Democratic presidents that we've had over time are bad people. I think that the policies, social and economic, don't lend themselves to our real progress. And that's why you see in blue cities all across America, Atlanta, DC, Baltimore, New York, Chicago, Detroit, Miami, Houston, where Black Democrats run everything from the school system to the police department, right? It's a mess. And it has been for quite some time. And so, again, not really a dig on the people, right? More a dig on the structure of the policies, who they benefit, what is the real intended outcome. I think today a lot of Black Americans are very much challenging that the narratives that were pushed relative to the outcomes were false. We just saw the job numbers that came out most recently, today or yesterday, were off by 800,000, right? The realities of our community, the reality is our community has suffered really under liberal, particularly Democrat policy. And I think that Vice President Harris is to some degree having to find a way to navigate that.
Now I want to kind of add this. I saw those numbers as well. That is not, numbers don't lie. So I have to give you that. But you guys are supporting Trump for president as a Republican Party overall, but he's the same people that's been funding the Democratic Party for years. He just turned Republican right before he won his first campaign, and that was only because he went from independent to Republican.
Sure.
So how is it different? Because honestly, if it wasn't for a lot of Republican leaders today, he wouldn't have the certain policies like Project 2025 and stuff like that that he's pushing now.
Yeah, that's a great point. So, I'm an institutional Democrat myself. Okay, born and raised in D.C. during the crack epidemic. Voted blue my whole life. Well, I voted for Barack Obama twice, right? And I'm very clear relative to the game that is played against people in my community. I'm very clear, okay? And as such, I would say to this gentleman, the reality is that many of us were on the Democratic aisle at one point. But when Barack Obama and his wife pushed divisive policies, like the LGBTGQ or whatever agenda, it pushed people like me into what's called the far right. I didn't leave the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party threw away a masculine black male who believed that boys are boys and girls are girls, who believed in fiscal responsibility, who believed in holding the community accountable. All of a sudden, that made me far right, right? So, you know, that Donald Trump hung out with Mike Tyson, that Donald Trump hung out with Diddy, that Donald Trump hung out with all these other people has no bearing on where he is today, really. If anything, I think it shows that the narrative that's pushed about him is incorrect as it relates to black Americans.
Well, let me ask you something, because
many of which he's financially supported in business.
there are a couple things you said that I want to get to, but what about the people that just say, you know, your ideology doesn't align because that's just plain homophobia? You know, there are people that feel that way, but also what you said about that you felt kind of cast out from the Democratic Party. I do think that it's important to note that politics has become increasingly extreme. You know, I feel like when I was growing up, there was kind of this idea of a moderate, a moderate, you know, conservative, moderate Republican, a moderate Democrat, and I kind of feel like that is completely gone. Yeah. So, you know, I do want to, you know, hold space for that, but at the same time, you know, these are identity things and matters of alignment in terms of ideology. So, Jaden, can you just kind of speak to that? This kind of increasing divide between any middle point where we can come to kind of you know, an agreement.
Yeah, and to be quite honest, I don't really think it's that anybody in leadership for each party can see a middle point. And I really think it's more so not because of where we are today. And for real, honestly, I know a lot of people that have left the party because they felt like they were pushed out. And so I actually understand that. But what I think, honestly, is just simply we're looking well beyond the spectrum of what we're here to do, which is the work. And so you always hear people say, we don't mix business and pleasure. We're mixing business and pleasure and politics. So now you're adding three things in a pot, and the seasonings don't match.
Yes.
And so just kind of saying that, this is, you know, America, home of the free, where you can come, you can be equal, well, so they say. But we're not affording those opportunities. And so I know you said it was divisive when the Obamas brought the LGBTQ plus into, you know, the forefront. Although I think some of the people in that specific realm are trying to push divisiveness, I don't think they, as the Obamas were pushing divisiveness, I just solely believe they were giving the group, the organization, the people, the opportunity to have the same stage that we're as black people are still constantly fighting for. Absolutely. That white people have had for years, and we are still trying to get a step on the pedestal.
Yeah. It's difficult because I think that, you know, we here in our institutions, the personal is inherently political. Yeah. It's hard, I think, in America not to have that rugged individualist mentality in every aspect of our lives. I feel like, you know, here we're pushed more towards individual kind of mentalities where, you know, the community kind of aspect seems like it's lacking. Yeah. I wonder, Jaden, if you feel like the DNC needs to kind of prioritize unifying and bringing that community together. And I wonder, for you, if you feel like the Republican Party needs to do the same, because I do see the extremism on the Republican Party too. You know, I remember growing up. It was, you know, Republicans, Tea Party, and then it felt like Trumpers, you know, and there was that kind of evolution. But, you know, what is the reconciliation of that? Because there are people in both parties who feel like they don't have a space.
Well, I want to clarify because I don't want it to feel like I don't want to leave this conversation with the general public thinking that I don't feel like there's a place, right? Certainly there are moderates within the Democrat Party that don't speak up today, and they're not on social media and whatnot, that don't say anything. So there are a large number of Americans that actually have some conservative values, a good deal of conservative values within the party. Okay. That they've been tricked out of a vote is another thing entirely, okay? But I want to go back to the point about community, you know. The reality is that socialism is alive and well within the Democrat Party. And that hasn't done anything for us in our communities. And so our communities are a nightmare. You know, communities like the one that Kamala Harris managed, right, as when she was a senator. Today, they're, you know, gun violence and everything else is a total disaster, and that's consistent in all blue districts.
You know what, Azad, I want to come back to that when we have the time, but our chief political correspondent, Tezlyn Figaro, is on the ground at the DNC Live, so we want to kick it to Tez so she can give us the tea on what's going on there.
Our allies will cheer. Our enemies will fear, and we will have a commander-in-chief that we can trust. God bless our veterans, and God bless our country.
You live?
What's happening in remote panel? This is girl Tezlyn Figaro, chief correspondent. She has been busy all week. Sunday, you've been on the ground. Tonight we're on the convention floor, and I'm talking to Atlanta's very own attorney, Chris Willis. I want you to talk to us about involved in the swing states. It's really critically important.
But I am proud to be a Marine. My mom raised us young. As Secretary of South,
Senator Warnock.
I slept on the floor.
And then in
I worked every job I could.
Senator
Meat packing, construction, making pizza.
So now we're in 2024.
I made it to Harvard.
Georgia is in
No
play.
money,
Not because of Joe Biden. Now we have Kamala
other kids were happy because they were at Harvard. I was happy because I finally had
Why is
a
it?
mattress.
There's also, a lot of people say a lot of black men are not on.
Catching notes from the break.
325 in Iraq.
Well, here's the
They
thing.
called us.
Okay. Sorry about that, guys. We are working out some technical stuff on the ground at the DNC, but luckily for you, we got our party going on here in Atlanta for our live show. So we want to bring the conversation back here. We were getting into it. Not everyone is enthusiastic about VP Harris, Jaden. Some black men in particular. Let's take a look.
In a million years, you would never get me to vote for Kamala Harris. You can put a gun to my head.
They are actively out here villainizing black men for not wanting to vote for Kamala Harris. And I said it before, and I will say it again. They think they own us.
The women that are telling black men that they have to vote for Kamala Harris, it is going to remind black men of every bitter baby mama.
Kamala Harris can't win, and she already said she's not going to do anything for black people.
They offered me $10K for an interview with Kamala Harris. I don't want your money.
I think she if she anything, she black and Indian, but she's not really from that life. You know what I'm saying? Like, she didn't grow up the black life, you know what I'm saying?
In a million years.
All right, so I want to open this up to the audience, too. If any of you guys believe in here that there's a disconnect between black male voters and VP Harris, raise your hand. Yeah? Yeah?
I just think it's more so about being miseducated.
Do you know what? Do you mind coming to the mic and sharing, please? Please, we would appreciate it. Because I do want to ask you guys, too, from your perspectives. Before we get to our panelists, the audience had a big reaction to that. So please share your name and give us a little something.
Yes, I go by the name of Brittany. I'm from Chattanooga, Tennessee. I've been living in Atlanta for about 13 years now. And I actually had an opportunity to be able to canvass and be a part of just getting people to register to vote with a nonpartisan nonprofit. And from my experience going into, of course, low, moderate income areas, it is a lot of black men that are not voting at all. A lot of black people not voting at all because they don't think that their voice matter. They don't think that it's heard or nothing's gonna change. And I know that's really just a slap in the face to our ancestors, because what they had to do to get us to the point where we could actually vote, women wasn't able to vote until late, 40s, 50s, 60s? I think it took a while. But I just say that to say it's just a lot of miseducation. I'm a product of Biden-Harris donating $2 million to the Urban League of Greater Atlanta, and I've been able to utilize their resources by applying for government contracting, learning how to build business credit, learning how to read profit and loss statements, and just networking, finding funding, because as a small business to scale and grow your business, funding is necessary. I mean, I can't speak for every black person in America, but if you seeking information and you trying to change your life and you seeking knowledge and you getting around the right people, the proof is in the pudding of what the administration is doing. If you actually want to do better for yourself, I can't speak for everybody, but you know, from my experience as a minority, small, black-owned business, women-owned business, I am truly benefiting from what they did. They actually gave over $200 million to all black organizations that are targeting our businesses to be able to like fund our business and give us resources and tools.
But in that, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but your perspective is really important because you were in the streets canvassing.
Yes.
So you've got to talk to the voters and communicate with them and see what, what kept them hesitant about being involved in the political process. So I do want to bring it back to my panelists because I want it to be full circle around.
I would like to address her comment.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't know your age. I won't ask. All right, especially in public. But I don't, for the audience, right? I don't want the tattoos to fool anybody, right? I'm a former United States Army officer. I manage a $700 million portfolio in corporate America. I work with private and public companies, private equity, venture capital, et cetera. Work with all the major firms from Fargo to Merrill Lynch. And I will tell you that the things that we need in our community relative to small business, the Democrat Party just doesn't want to give them. And I'll give you an example. Today, they will pump $200 million into black communities for us to start barbershops and beauty salons. But where we're going to build real wealth and scalable businesses are in the trades: plumbers and pipe fitters, electricians, elevator constructors, masonry. Right? Here in Atlanta, for example, there are absolutely no SBE requirements. The city of Atlanta procurement department manages that. It's all Democrats, right? They could easily say, hey, because I'm an SDVOB and I'm an MBE certified, they could say, hey, we're going to publish a requirement to have an SBE involvement in large scope projects in real scalable business. Yeah. And the reality is they won't do it. They won't do it. And when they do, it's so that the money can circle back around to their friends.
Azad, and I'm glad you bring up small businesses because that's important. That's a lot of voters are interested in protections and grants and opportunities for small businesses.
Sure.
Yes, and a lot of black women, black men own small businesses.
Sure.
And actually need that funding. So I do want to give that its due, but I want to get back to the topic at hand, which is, what is this disconnect about with black men in supporting VP Harris? Is it a gender divide? Is it, what? Please speak to that.
So going back to business, black men are very entrepreneurial. A lot of that has to do with the challenges that they've had in trying to find jobs that pay a livable wage, professional jobs. So they've migrated to entrepreneurship, but when they get to entrepreneurship, they find that it's difficult to scale again, because the programs and policies that are in place relative to growing the scale and building real wealth, they just aren't there. It's superficial, and that's coming from the founder of the first and only black-owned elevator company in North America. Shout out to 8 Alpha Elevator, 8 Alpha Construction Services. But bottom line, right? Bottom line, if I want to start a business in an industry worth $50 or $60 billion in North America, right? there are very limited number of opportunities relative to support through programs to compete. That's just a reality of it.
I think I'm going to jump in here. I don't think
please do.
It's not the disconnect, which is the topic at which we're referring to right now, is not just necessarily just business, although it is an aspect. I think what we're really trying to get into is what is the direct disconnect. And I think it's back to what I think it was you, somebody in the audience, saying the disconnect is the miseducation.
Yeah, that's the major part.
And that's the number one thing that everybody's trying to go around is the miseducation.
Right.
And so we have the business aspect, we have the gender, we have the race, we have the age. Age is always gonna be a factor because we just childish, Americans, okay? But when you really get down into it, it's miseducation. And just like Brittany said, it goes back to what we fought for, right? And so who are the people that really fought for black people to get those voting rights? You got Ambassador Andrew Young, John Lewis, C.T. Vivian, Martin Luther King. Those are our pillars of voting, right? And so now we're like, okay, now y'all want us to put this black lady up here? They here to cook, clean, because that's the mentality we grew up with, right? And I'm from the South. That's our mentality. They cook, clean, they hold our backs, they rub us down. We get what we need. But we also have to understand that in a new generation, a new decade, we have to understand women are more than just what we've stereotyped them, because black people can also stereotype each other. We've been doing it. And so we have to understand black women are the pillar of our community. And so now we have to say, okay, although she's vice president, cool, what has she been doing in that position? And honestly, it's not much she can do. She's the vice president. But that's the disconnect. It's the miseducation of voting and access.
But we should not discredit black males relative to their education about the system.
And not discrediting them at all.
The reality is they're not undereducated. They're awake. They're awake and they're thinking on their own. I stopped at a BP gas station today on Howell Mill Road. I also stopped at a barbershop in the same general area. And guess what the reality is? The reality is that a lot of black men standing outside the gas station are pissed off with the Democrat Party because they feel like the party separated them from their families. And that goes back to a generational issue dating back to the 60s. Things like welfare, so forth and so on. They attribute and align the issues that they have with their women, with their families, with getting jobs, to the Democrat Party. And if you don't believe me, talk to the brothers in Techwood, or talk to the brothers standing outside the BP gas station over there at the corner of, I think that's right there where Fulton Industrial, whatever it is, meets Howell Mill, somewhere in that general area.
Our institutions are over there, and I can tell you half them people on them streets are drunk or high. I can assure you they don't understand half the stuff they're talking about 95% of the time.
I want to talk about the gendered aspects of this election, because, I mean, you brought it up. You said almost there is kind of like a deferred anger, you know, toward you.
Anger? I wouldn't say anger.
Maybe not anger or dissatisfaction.
I don't want the government to teach my children about things that they have no business teaching my children. It's not that Republicans have any issue, particularly black Republicans, with homosexuals, gays, lesbians, so forth and so on. The issue is with pulling God out of the school. You know, the kids don't want to say, in some schools, the kids don't do the Pledge of Allegiance, but you want to put a rainbow flag in. We got to have some understanding of the real, true core issues in our community, and we can't be thinking that everybody's so far left and right. Listen, if this brother right here told me today that he was homosexual, he liked other men, got no bearing on it. I got homosexual men in my family. Has no bearing on whether I love this brother or not. The issue is what is being pushed as a program and whether it's divisive or not in our communities. And that I have a problem with, as do many other black males. Just calling it like it is.
I appreciate
But we should not assume that black Republicans have some sort of hatred.
Yeah.
You know, I hate that stipulation, and I'm highly involved in the party, and I'm here to tell all black Americans, because I deal with white Republicans all the time. There's no hate for homosexuality. There's no hate for, listen, it's not as extreme as the programs that are pushed through media and the Democrat Party would have you believe. Bottom line is, you do what you want to do in the privacy of your home, but you can't teach that to my daughter. I don't want a man in a girl's bathroom. But those are the real true core issues.
What would you say to the people who are like, I want my child to have a non-religious education. I don't want my child, to be imposed a religion upon them.
Nobody's
if
imposing.
That's not,
nobody.
You know what I'm saying? If that's not my constitution,
but
if that's not what I want for my family, so why is it okay? You know what I'm saying? Why is that okay?
The school system isn't imposing a religion on anyone. The school system is saying, because the vast majority of society globally has a God, the school system is saying that we should pledge allegiance to our flag and our nation under visible with God. That's it. They're not saying you should be a Christian or Muslim or whatever else.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. I want to open it up to the audience because I know you guys have some stuff to say about this. Please introduce yourself and bring what you want to the floor.
I am Sydney, and I am from the great state of Alabama. I'm from Montgomery. And I want to go back to Kennedy's question where she was saying the disconnect. And I agree that we shouldn't discredit black men by blaming it on being undereducated, because one of the things is that being contrarian is very popular now. So doing the opposite of what black people have done for decades is cool now. It's spicy, it's interesting. And so without looking at policy, without looking at actual outcomes, without looking at the numbers, people say, oh, you want me to vote Democrat because I'm black, so I'm going to do the opposite. And I think that's one thing that we're also having to fight back against: powerful miseducation, not undereducation, and just wanting to be different from what we've done historically.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
Yeah.
I do think that's a great point. We do, live in a time where it is cool to kind of befriend.
Yeah, be a little rebellious.
What do you see, Jaden, on your campus, just, in your everyday life? Is that something that you come in contact with? Is that something about your experience that you could speak to?
Yeah, absolutely. More so looking into it, it's something we do on a daily basis. I've seen multiple peers write essays, and they're literally just combating exactly what we've done in history, because everybody says, oh, history repeats itself. And so I feel like, yeah, this is a generation that's like, okay, how can I do something different? How can I make my own mark? So yeah, her statement was absolutely 1,000% valid, because it's something we see on a daily basis today. I know that on both sides.
Yeah,
I was say that's both sides.
Absolutely, absolutely. I want to let our brother
it doesn't negate the fact, though, that that black Americans voting at a clip of 87 and 90% for a party is damaging to their political strength in the nation that they're from, right? So the reality is that that while I wouldn't recommend that we all go vote for Democrats, I can't say that I would also agree that we should go all vote for Republicans. What I'm saying is that a healthy balance in our community is one where people are not all thinking the same and marshaling along to a program that was pushed to us from our grandma and our mama and our aunties and so forth and so on. It just doesn't make good sense. Times change, policies change, programs change, people change, and we, as a society, have to change.
But that kind of piggybacks kind of just exactly what she said. We were pushed into what we say the Democratic Party, but I also think that it's high time a lot of us did our own research and decided to stay with the Democratic Party. But just going back, we wanted to be different. Hold on. Let me finish. We wanted to be different. We wanted to make our own mark. We wanted to be rebellious. So at first, let's be real. When black people first had the opportunity to vote, majority of them were conservative. Majority of them were Republican. Us making our own mark, us being rebellious, us making our own decision was going, oh, we're going to go straight to the Democratic Party. But I don't think it's still the same way. I think some of us are now making the same decision, but while you also have others that are like, okay, I'm going to follow in grandmother's footsteps. I don't know anything but what was taught me.
Right.
But it's just some fact that, yes, that's kind of what is happening in history. It's really happening all over again, because we're doing the same thing. We're going from Republican Party to Democratic Party.
Producers told me to just jump in. So,
please.
I wanted to say, if you look at it, if you've taken a 4th grade history class, you know that at one point African Americans voted Republican, and then at some point we switched over to that's basic civics lessons. James Baldwin did a debate in England with William Buckley, who is a staunch conservative, and if you look at the empirical data, black people didn't just wake up one morning and decide, you know what, I want to be a Democrat. Yeah. It was policy in place that made them, move that way. And early in the program, Kennedy, you asked, is there something that the parties need to call out? You yourself, you just said that what you do in your home is your personal business. And so as a woman, if I keep that $500 on me and I need to spend it, that's my business, and that's between me and whoever is in my home. I don't want the government telling me that I'm gonna go to hell just because I got to get the baby up out of here, you know? So.
And you know what? And thank you for making that point, because that is obviously, abortion is a huge, huge topic, especially amongst Gen Z and millennial voters. So I do want to actually come back to that too when we have a moment to break it down. And I will need some more women voices around that, because as much as we love our gentlemen here,
we want to hear from y'all. We want to hear from the women.
To speak to some women, you know, about our bodies and our issues. That aside, please, sir.
How you doing?
Give it to us.
My name is Lil Wayne. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. I want to speak about the misinformation, because it is misinformation in the African American male community, myself included, right? We don't seek the answers, right? So I wanted to deep dive into Kamala Harris's arrest record, right? So I had always been told thousands of black men were locked up in jail. I take a night of research, and then I make a video saying, okay, I did some research. It was 1,900 people arrested with 45 going to jail. That video goes nationwide, right? And then I see the next day the talking points start to shift with that little piece of information that I gave. But it doesn't go to such an advanced level of policies and things like that. It could be something as simple as who was responsible for giving us a stimulus check, right? The narrative in the African-American male community is that Donald Trump did it. And when we all saw this happening in real time, we saw the adversity from Republican side saying, no, they'll never go back to work if we give them $1,200, right? And then he said he will not sign those checks until he can put his name on it, right? And then he can get those out to us. Once he did that, I'm like, okay, nobody's going to fall for the fact that he did that. We all saw they were against this. But as we see 4 years later, this is a talking point in our community. So it's not something as advanced as in-depth policies or government spending or government funding. It's something as small as who did what for the African-American community. And that misinformation is very big.
Absolutely. I think that's really important. I want to give you guys a chance to.
Yeah, I'm going to say this, you know, the Trump administration pushed for opportunity zones in economically distressed areas all over the country, vast majority of which are our communities. And that policy, that initiative pushed $75 billion, $75 billion into our communities. And I would challenge that there's no one in this room who can point at anything that Barack Obama did in either one of his 2 terms that was similar. And you definitely, I'm looking around, I'm waiting. I would like to know who in this room can point at what Joe Biden did.
As a product,
or what policy, or excuse me, what initiative that Kamala Harris is going to embark upon in her next 4 years.
In regards to?
In regards to pushing $75 billion into your communities. It simply doesn't exist.
Well, as a product of Hampton University, you know, I can say that the administration has given
HBCU, who?
Hampton, millions of dollars to our HBCUs that we vastly need. So I will say that that is a policy that I've seen go into effect and dramatically benefit our community.
And sir, to speak on your point, because I think what you said is important. There's a narrative that went on for a really long time that I do think contributed to kind of that distaste or that kind of hesitancy from Harris. And I do know, I don't know if you saw this, Jaden, that the Central Park 5 spoke at the DNC, and they actually said, you know, Trump was one of the people who was really pushing for their arrest. So, you know, I wonder if hearing their testimony, their lived experience, kind of combats this idea that, you know, VP Harris just wants to lock all these, you know, black people up for no reason.
Well, I will say, you know, the information that I found, it wasn't something that was just published during this run of presidency, right? That article I got that from was from 2019. So that tells me this information, that arrest record that we all stuck with had been around since that time. And it had always been there. The real answer had always been there. We never went to seek it, though. And that was the issue I find in a lot of black people, is that we don't seek that information. It is easily accessible to us. Right.
Yeah. So there's some misinformation there. I think. I'll say this. The social media influencers, like we just saw Anton Daniels and so many others, when they point at her record in California, I really think the essence of what they're trying to point at is that the arrest of black men, right, the leveraging of the criminal justice system against black males in America, oftentimes those imposing that on us are our own people in our own cities. You know, we saw here in Atlanta, black female, DA. We saw in Baltimore, a young lady was convicted of mortgage fraud, right? Black female DA. The list goes on and on and on, right? And so I think folks like Anton Daniels, I can't speak for the brother, but I think a lot of other brothers who are looking at this situation are saying that my women, or our women, our community's women, are being leveraged to the agenda of a white liberal bigot that doesn't like us. You know, the idea here is that I'll put a black female on the stand and she'll throw the book at you. And that's the essence of what you're hearing. So there is some misinformation, like the brother's saying, but the general gist, I would recommend to anybody in here take a look at all those major cities that I rattled off earlier. You know, look on your phone and see who is the DA, right? What you're going to find is that Democrats were in charge in every one of those cities, and then oftentimes the person that's used to damage us is someone who looks like us. Nothing against black women. I mean, we need more black women, female attorneys, and the whole nine. Man, I'm with it. Okay. But what I'm saying is we got to be careful not to allow some of us to get used as pawns against us. That's the point that I'm making.
I want to let you respond to that, Jaden.
Yeah, I was going to jump in. Thank you, Kenny. But I definitely kind of wanted to hit miseducation is key, was what we've targeted, number one. But in regards to those specific cities that you kind of named, it's not just simply a fact that they were all ran by black Democratic leaders, whether they're Democrat or not. It's the simple fact of how the placement of the city is, because you have a lot of cities where actually the Republican Party shipped a lot of people into those major cities, so there's hard to put as much progress because there's not enough funding or there's not enough allocation for said businesses or opportunities for housing. So it's not just simply the fact that the Democratic Party are failing those communities, because honestly, you have a lot of Democratic communities that you named, because you only named urban cities, but you didn't name any of the smaller cities, but you have a lot of rural cities that were not benefited from some of the things that Trump has done. And then you also have smaller cities that are benefiting and flourishing with full Democratic, all black DA, city council, mayor, chair, all of that. And so I don't think it's really more so the leadership, but I think it's more so the allocation of resources. And so I think that's the part you're trying to get us to go around, rather than just the leadership, it's the allocation of resources.
I think today there are a record number of resources in our, I know that today there are a record number of resources in our community. The greater issue is the underutilization of those resources. I'll give you an example. Business that I work with had $174 million to spend nationally with diverse businesses, right? And I can't find people to take the money. You know what I mean? You know, I'll give you another example. Your brother mentioned Hampton. I went to school right up the road, HBCU, Morgan State University. Bears go all day, right? The reality is that only 32% of the students finish school. You know, the reality in the situation is that there are iPads and there are books and there are all these things. And in many instances in our communities, we're not doing the work. And that's a very uncomfortable truth for many of us. But there are a lot of us that are drinking mimosas on Sunday right here in Atlanta rather than doing homework with these children. And so as it relates to resources, there are a ton of resources. Anybody in this room is welcome to get with me. And I can show you how to get to the bag. Or you can follow Anton Daniels, and we can help show you how to get to the bag.
I think we can both agree that resources is a huge thing.
Yeah, but they're not underlined. They're just not accessed for our communities.
I was gonna say, I think
they're not underlined.
I think access is the big thing, which you know we can work on, and I wanna get into that later. I know we do not have time to get into every single thing right now, but I do want to acknowledge the audience. You guys watching us online, thank you so much. We see your comments. The audience has questions for you guys that we want to get into. Yes, reparations is on top of mind for them, so we do want to know both of the parties' stances on that and how you guys feel about that. And again, we want to hear more from our studio audience and you guys, but we're going to go right now live to the DNC.
For every one of us, our Democratic nominee, my big sister, the next President of the United States, Kamala Harris.
Please welcome North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper.
Hello, America. I'm Roy Cooper, the last guy standing between you and the moment we're all waiting for. So I'm going to get right to it. All week, you've heard stories about my friend Kamala. I want to take you behind the scenes of one of them. 2011 was a rough time for American homeowners. Hundreds of thousands were losing their homes to illegal foreclosure. I was Attorney General in North Carolina, while Kamala had just become California's. All the AGs were close to a settlement with the big banks, and it was a pretty good deal. Would have meant $4 billion for California families who'd been ripped off. I know that sounds like a lot, but Kamala said, hang on a minute. I've met these families. I know what they've been through, and they deserve more. She went toe-to-toe with some of the world's most powerful executives, and she refused to give in. Let me tell you, this was a huge risk, but she knew it was a risk worth taking. That's Kamala. And we all know what happened. The banks caved. That $4 billion for California families became $20 billion. That was the first time I witnessed Kamala in action. And what I saw was a leader who does exactly what she says she's going to do, who never will settle for less. America, we got a lot of big fights ahead of us, and we've got one hell of a fighter ready to take them on. I know that because I know her. And tonight, I want the American people to know, even if you don't agree with her on everything, Kamala Harris will fight for you to the very end. For families who need better health care or a safer place to live, Kamala will fight for you. For parents who want better schools for their kids, for workers worried about a secure retirement for themselves, Kamala will fight for you. For any one of our allies, anywhere in the world, wondering if America still has your back, remember this: Kamala will fight for you. And when she fights, we win. Kamala's ready. Kamala's ready. The question is, are we? Are we going to stand up and fight for Kamala like she'll stand up and fight for us? All right. If you're ready, my home state of North Carolina, stand up. Stand up, Pennsylvania. Stand up, Michigan. Stand up, Wisconsin. Stand up, Georgia. Stand up, Nevada. Stand up, Arizona. Stand up, America. Are we going to stand up? Are we going to fight? Are we going to vote? Are we going to win? You bet we are. Let's go get them.
She grew up in a tight-knit neighborhood. It was the kind of place where your neighbor would look after you when school let out, where your first-grade teacher would show up at your law school graduation. It's where Kamala Harris learned what it means to be in the middle class, making every paycheck count. She was raised by a working mom who taught her about standing up for what's right and protecting the people you love.
Kamala carries the lessons of our mother, the fighting spirit of our mother, the compassion.
She was all of 5 feet tall. If you met her, you would have thought she was 7 feet tall. And our mother, if I'd ever come home complaining about anything, she wouldn't have it. The first thing she'd say is, well, just stop the complaining. Just tell me what you're going to do about it.
And since she was a young girl, Kamala Harris has been fighting for families like the ones she grew up with.
That is Kamala. She can't help herself from standing up for people and standing up for what she thinks is right. She has been that way our whole lives. Being a protector is what led her to become a prosecutor. Looking back now, I could say it was her calling.
As a courtroom prosecutor, she went after predators who targeted women and children, and fraudsters who ripped off working families. And she put dangerous gang members and human traffickers behind bars.
We didn't have partnerships with DOJ or FBI or DEA or any of those law enforcement agencies. Now, we all work collaboratively. She was the person who built the foundation in how we do criminal justice in America.
As Attorney General of California, she held the big Wall Street banks accountable for fraud, winning $20 billion for California families. She took on one of the largest for-profit colleges that was scamming students. And in the Senate, she fought for her constituents with the determination of a prosecutor, standing up for reproductive freedom.
Can you think of any laws that give the government the power to make decisions about the male body?
I'm not thinking of any right now, Senator.
She fought to keep our children safe from the terror of gun violence.
How many of you guys had to have a drill where you learned about how you need to hide in a closet or crouch in a corner in the event that there is a mass shooter? Look at that. Look at that.
On the Intelligence Committee, she defended our nation against foreign adversaries. And in 2020, she made history as the first woman to be elected Vice President of the United States. She cast the tie-breaking vote to deliver urgent relief to the American people during the pandemic. She beat Big Pharma to lower prescription drug costs and cap the cost of insulin, and led the fight to restore reproductive rights after Roe v. Wade was overturned.
We have worked too hard and fought too long to see our daughters grow up in a world with fewer rights than our mothers.
Because she's never been afraid to stand up to powerful interests.
Sometimes people will open the door for you and leave it open, sometimes they won't. And then you need to kick that door down. Excuse my language.
Now, she's running for president, still fighting for families like the one she grew up with.
Our campaign is about saying we trust the people. We're saying we just want fairness. We want dignity for all people. And we are a work in progress. We haven't yet quite reached all of those ideals, but we will die trying because we love our country. We believe in our country. We're not falling for these folks who are trying to divide us, trying to pull us apart. We know what we stand for, and we stand for the people, and we stand for the dignity of work, and we stand for freedom. We stand for justice. We stand for equality. And so we will fight for all of it.
That's who Kamala Harris is. That's what she believes, and that's what she'll fight for every day.
Please welcome the Democratic nominee for president, Vice President of the United States of America, Kamala Harris.
you. Thank you. Thank you. Good evening. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you all. Okay, we got to get to some business. We got to get to some business. Okay, thank you all. Okay. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you, please, thank you, please, thank you so very much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Okay, let's get to business. Let's get to business. All right. So let me start by thanking my most incredible husband, Doug, for being an incredible partner to me, an incredible father to Cole and Ella, and happy anniversary, Dougie. I love you so very much. To our President, Joe Biden. When I think about the path that we have traveled together, Joe, I am filled with gratitude. Your record is extraordinary, as history will show, and your character is inspiring. And Doug and I love you and Jill and are forever thankful to you both. And to Coach Tim Walz, you are going to be an incredible vice president. And to the delegates and everyone who has put your faith in our campaign, your support is humbling. So, America, the path that led me here in recent weeks was no doubt unexpected. But I'm no stranger to unlikely journeys. So, my mother, our mother, Kamala Harris, had one of her own. And I miss her every day, and especially right now. And I know she's looking down, smiling. I know that. So my mother was 19 when she crossed the world alone, traveling from India to California with an unshakable dream to be the scientist who would cure breast cancer. When she finished school, she was supposed to return home to a traditional arranged marriage. But as fate would have it, she met my father, Donald Harris, a student from Jamaica. They fell in love and got married, and that act of self-determination made my sister Maya and me. Growing up, we moved a lot. I will always remember that big Mayflower truck packed with all our belongings, ready to go to Illinois, to Wisconsin, and wherever our parents' jobs took us. My early memories of our parents together are very joyful ones. A home filled with laughter and music, Aretha, Coltrane, and Miles. At the park, my mother would say, "Stay close." But my father would say, as he smiled, "Run, Kamala, run. Don't be afraid. Don't let anything stop you." From my earliest years, he taught me to be fearless. But the harmony between my parents did not last. When I was in elementary school, they split up. And it was mostly my mother who raised us. Before she could finally afford to buy a home, she rented a small apartment in the East Bay. In the Bay, you either live in the hills or the flatlands. We lived in the flats. A beautiful working-class neighborhood of firefighters, nurses, and construction workers, all who tended their lawns with pride. My mother, she worked long hours, and like many working parents, she leaned on a trusted circle to help raise us. Mrs. Shelton, who ran the daycare below us and became a second mother. Uncle Sherman, Aunt Mary, Uncle Freddie, Auntie Chris. None of them family by blood, and all of them family by love. Family who taught us how to make gumbo, how to play chess, and sometimes even let us win. Family who loved us, believed in us, and told us we could be anything and do anything. They instilled in us the values they personified: community, faith, and the importance of treating others as you would want to be treated, with kindness, respect, and compassion. My mother was a brilliant, 5-foot-tall, brown woman with an accent. And as the eldest child, I saw how the world would sometimes treat her. But my mother never lost her cool. She was tough, courageous, a trailblazer in the fight for women's health, and she taught Maya and me a lesson that Michelle mentioned the other night. She taught us to never complain about injustice, but do something about it. Do something about it. That was my mother. And she taught us, and she also taught us, and never do anything half-assed. And that is a direct quote. A direct quote. I grew up immersed in the ideals of the civil rights movement. My parents had met at a civil rights gathering, and they made sure that we learned about civil rights leaders, including the lawyers like Thurgood Marshall and Constance Baker Motley, those who battled in the courtroom to make real the promise of America. So at a young age, I decided I wanted to do that work. I wanted to be a lawyer. And when it came time to choose the type of law I would pursue, I reflected on a pivotal moment in my life. You see, when I was in high school, I started to notice something about my best friend, Wanda. She was sad at school, and there were times she didn't want to go home. So one day I asked if everything was all right, and she confided in me that she was being sexually abused by her stepfather. And I immediately told her she had to come stay with us, and she did. This is one of the reasons I became a prosecutor, to protect people like Wanda, because I believe everyone has a right to safety, to dignity, and to justice. As a prosecutor, when I had a case, I charged it not in the name of the victim, but in the name of the people. For a simple reason. In our system of justice, a harm against any one of us is a harm against all of us. And I would often explain this to console survivors of crime, to remind them, no one should be made to fight alone. We are all in this together. And every day in the courtroom, I stood proudly before a judge and I said 5 words: Kamala Harris for the people. And to be clear, my entire career, I've only had one client, the people. And so, on behalf of the people, on behalf of every American, regardless of party, race, gender, or the language your grandmother speaks, on behalf of my mother and everyone who has ever set out on their own unlikely journey, on behalf of Americans like the people I grew up with, people who work hard, chase their dreams, and look out for one another, on behalf of everyone whose story could only be written in the greatest nation on earth, I accept your nomination to be President of the United States of America. And with this election, our nation with this election has a precious, fleeting opportunity to move past the bitterness, cynicism, and divisive battles of the past, a chance to chart a new way forward. Not as members of any one party or faction, but as Americans. And let me say, I know there are people of various political views watching tonight, and I want you to know, I promise to be a president for all Americans. You can always trust me to put country above party and self, to hold sacred America's fundamental principles, from the rule of law to free and fair elections to the peaceful transfer of power. I will be a president who unites us around our highest aspirations, a president who leads and listens, who is realistic, practical, and has common sense, and always fights for the American people. From the courthouse to the White House, that has been my life's work. As a young courtroom prosecutor in Oakland, California, I stood up for women and children against predators who abuse them. As Attorney General of California, I took on the big banks, delivered $20 billion for middle-class families who faced foreclosure, and helped pass a homeowner Bill of Rights, one of the first of its kind in the nation. I stood up for veterans and students being scammed by big for-profit colleges, for workers who are being cheated out of their wages, the wages they were due, for seniors facing elder abuse. I fought against the cartels who traffic in guns and drugs and human beings, who threaten the security of our border and the safety of our communities. And I will tell you, these fights were not easy, and neither were the elections that put me in those offices. We were underestimated at practically every turn, but we never gave up, because the future is always worth fighting for. And that's the fight we are in right now, a fight for America's future. Fellow Americans, this election is not only the most important of our lives, it is one of the most important in the life of our nation. In many ways, Donald Trump is an unserious man. But the consequences of putting Donald Trump back in the White House are extremely serious. Consider not only the chaos and calamity when he was in office, but also the gravity of what has happened since he lost the last election. Donald Trump tried to throw away your votes. When he failed, he sent an armed mob to the United States Capitol, where they assaulted law enforcement officers. When politicians in his own party begged him to call off the mob and send help, he did the opposite. He fanned the flames. And now, for an entirely different set of crimes, he was found guilty of fraud by a jury of everyday Americans, and separately found liable for committing sexual abuse. And consider what he intends to do if we give him power again. Consider his explicit intent to set free violent extremists who assaulted those law enforcement officers at the Capitol. His explicit intent to jail journalists, political opponents, and anyone he sees as the enemy. His explicit intent to deploy our active duty military against our own citizens. Consider the power he will have, especially after the United States Supreme Court just ruled that he would be immune from criminal prosecution. Just imagine Donald Trump with no guardrails, and how he would use the immense powers of the presidency of the United States, not to improve your life, not to strengthen our national security, but to serve the only client he has ever had, himself. And we know what a second Trump term would look like. It's all laid out in Project 2025, written by his closest advisors, and its sum total is to pull our country back to the past. But America, we are not going back. We are not going back. We are not going back. We are not going back to when Donald Trump tried to cut Social Security and Medicare. We are not going back to when he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, when insurance companies could deny people with pre-existing conditions. We are not going to let him eliminate the Department of Education that funds our public schools. We are not going to let him end programs like Head Start that provide preschool and childcare for our children. America, we are not going back. Charting a new way forward to a future with a strong and growing middle class, because we know a strong middle class has always been critical to America's success. And building that middle class will be a defining goal of my presidency. And I'll tell you, this is personal for me. The middle class is where I come from. My mother kept a strict budget. We lived within our means, yet we wanted for little. And she expected us to make the most of the opportunities that were available to us and to be grateful for them. Because, as she taught us, opportunity is not available to everyone. That's why we will create what I call an opportunity economy where everyone has the chance to compete and a chance to succeed. Whether you live in a rural area, small town, or big city. And as president, I will bring together labor and workers and small business owners and entrepreneurs and American companies to create jobs, to grow our economy, and to lower the cost of everyday needs like health care and housing and groceries. We will provide access to capital for small business owners and entrepreneurs and founders. And we will end America's housing shortage and protect Social Security and Medicare. Now compare that to Donald Trump, because I think everyone here knows he doesn't actually fight for the middle class. He doesn't actually fight for the middle class. Instead, he fights for himself and his billionaire friends. And he will give them another round of tax breaks that will add up to $5 trillion to the national debt. And all the while, he intends to enact what in effect is a national sales tax, call it a Trump tax, that would raise prices on middle-class families by almost $4,000 a year. Well, instead of a Trump tax hike, we will pass a middle-class tax cut that will benefit more than 100 million Americans. Friends, I believe America cannot truly be prosperous unless Americans are fully able to make their own decisions about their own lives, especially on matters of heart and home. But tonight, in America, too many women are not able to make those decisions. And let's be clear about how we got here. Donald Trump handpicked members of the United States Supreme Court to take away reproductive freedom. And now he brags about it. In his words, quote, "I did it and I'm proud to have done it," end quote. Well, I'll tell you, over the past 2 years, I've traveled across our country, and women have told me their stories. Husbands and fathers have shared theirs. Stories of women miscarrying in a parking lot, developing sepsis, losing the ability to ever again have children, all because doctors are afraid they may go to jail for caring for their patients. Couples just trying to grow their family, cut off in the middle of IVF treatments. children who have survived sexual assault, potentially being forced to carry a pregnancy to term. This is what's happening in our country because of Donald Trump. And understand, he is not done. As a part of his agenda, he and his allies would limit access to birth control, ban medication abortion, and enact a nationwide abortion ban with or without Congress. And get this, he plans to create a national anti-abortion coordinator and force states to report on women's miscarriages and abortions. Simply put, they are out of their minds. And one must ask, why exactly is it that they don't trust women? Well, we trust women. We trust women. And when Congress passes a bill to restore reproductive freedom, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. In this election, many other fundamental freedoms are at stake. The freedom to live safe from gun violence in our schools, communities, and places of worship. The freedom to love who you love openly and with pride. The freedom to breathe clean air and drink clean water and live free from the pollution that fuels the climate crisis. And the freedom that unlocks all the others, the freedom to vote. With this election, we finally have the opportunity to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and the Freedom to Vote Act. And let me be clear. After decades in law enforcement, I know the importance of safety and security, especially at our border. Last year, Joe and I brought together Democrats and conservative Republicans to write the strongest border bill in decades. The Border Patrol endorsed it. But Donald Trump believes a border deal would hurt his campaign. So he ordered his allies in Congress to kill the deal. Well, I refuse to play politics with our security, and here is my pledge to you. As president, I will bring back the bipartisan border security bill that he killed, and I will sign it into law. I know we can live up to our proud heritage as a nation of immigrants and reform our broken immigration system. We can create an earned pathway to citizenship and secure our border. And America, we must also be steadfast in advancing our security and values abroad. As Vice President, I have confronted threats to our security, negotiated with foreign leaders, strengthened our alliances, and engaged with our brave troops overseas. As Commander-in-Chief, I will ensure America always has the strongest, most lethal fighting force in the world. And I will fulfill our sacred obligation to care for our troops and their families, and I will always honor and never disparage their service and their sacrifice. I will make sure that we lead the world into the future on space and artificial intelligence, that America, not China, wins the competition for the 21st century, and that we strengthen, not abdicate, our global leadership. Trump, on the other hand, threatened to abandon NATO. He encouraged Putin to invade our allies, said Russia could, quote, do whatever the hell they want. 5 days before Russia attacked Ukraine, I met with President Zelensky to warn him about Russia's plan to invade. I helped mobilize a global response, over 50 countries, to defend against Putin's aggression. And as president, I will stand strong with Ukraine and our NATO allies. With respect to the war in Gaza, President Biden and I are working around the clock, because now is the time to get a hostage deal and a ceasefire deal done. And let me be clear, I will always stand up for Israel's right to defend itself, and I will always ensure Israel has the ability to defend itself, because the people of Israel must never again face the horror that a terrorist organization called Hamas caused on October 7, including unspeakable sexual violence and the massacre of young people at a music festival. At the same time, what has happened in Gaza over the past 10 months is devastating. So many innocent lives lost. Desperate, hungry people fleeing for safety over and over again. The scale of suffering is heartbreaking. President Biden and I are working to end this war such that Israel is secure, the hostages are released, the suffering in Gaza ends, and the Palestinian people can realize their right to dignity, security, freedom, and self-determination. And know this, I will never hesitate to take whatever action is necessary to defend our forces and our interests against Iran and Iran-backed terrorists. I will not cozy up to tyrants and dictators like Kim Jong-un, who are rooting for Trump, Because, you know, they know he is easy to manipulate with flattery and favors. They know Trump won't hold autocrats accountable because he wants to be an autocrat himself. And as president, I will never waver in defense of America's security and ideals, because in the enduring struggle between democracy and tyranny, I know where I stand and I know where the United States belongs. So fellow Americans, I love our country with all my heart. Everywhere I go, in everyone I meet, I see a nation that is ready to move forward, ready for the next step in the incredible journey that is America. I see an America where we hold fast to the fearless belief that built our nation and inspired the world, that here in this country, anything is possible, that nothing is out of reach. An America where we care for one another, look out for one another, and recognize that we have so much more in common than what separates us. That none of us has to fail for all of us to succeed. And that in unity there is strength. You know, our opponents in this race are out there every day denigrating America, talking about how terrible everything is. Well, my mother had another lesson she used to teach. Never let anyone tell you who you are. You show them who you are. America, let us show each other and the world who we are and what we stand for. Freedom, opportunity, compassion, dignity, fairness, and endless possibilities. We are the heirs to the greatest democracy in the history of the world. And on behalf of our children and our grandchildren and all those who sacrificed so dearly for our freedom and liberty, we must be worthy of this moment. It is now our turn to do what generations before us have done, guided by optimism and faith, to fight for this country we love, to fight for the ideals we cherish, and to uphold the awesome responsibility that comes with the greatest privilege on earth, the privilege and pride of being an American. So let's get out there, let's fight for it, let's get out there, let's vote for it, and together, let us write the next great chapter in the most extraordinary story ever told. Thank you. God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America. Thank you all.
Vice President Kamala Harris, age 59, daughter of Oakland, accepting her party's nomination for the presidency of the United States of America. It was a speech that 4 weeks and 5 days ago she was not preparing to make. But as she said, she is no stranger to unlikely journeys. She shared with us her origin story as a prosecutor with her childhood friend, Wanda Kagan, who is here tonight, being molested by her stepfather. She talked about representing the people, Kamala Harris for the people, in her time as a prosecutor. She discussed how she would be a president for everyone, from wanting to form an opportunity economy to build and strengthen the middle class. It was a speech of progressive politics and unifying rhetoric, a speech with many, many shots across the bow of Donald Trump, her opponent, and a speech in which she sought to portray herself as a credible commander-in-chief, patriotic, firm, confident, and credible. She discussed Israel and Palestine. She discussed Ukraine. She discussed the threat from Iran. It was a remarkable address, one that I've never seen her give quite like this before. A very, very powerful speech. You got to go back, I think, to Barack Obama in 2008 for a Democratic speech like this, perhaps even a speech like this at all. Dana?
Jake, the hallmark of her vice presidency until the Dobbs decision was that she was dismissed and underestimated. And even now, some Biden aides are saying that they didn't treat her the way that they should have. And the theme of this speech was that she's an underdog. The theme of the speech was, don't underestimate America. Don't underestimate all of us.
All right, this is Tezlyn Figaro, chief political correspondent here at the Democrat National Convention on the floor with Amber Sherman from the great state of Memphis, the home of Project Pat, the home of 3-6 Mafia, the home of Big Glow. I had to make sure. Yeah, all of them. I had to put out Memphis is some of my favorite music. But we're not here to talk about music. We're here to talk about movement. What is tonight? What does it mean to you as a black woman? Does it move the needle? Does it give you hope? Or is there still some hesitation, particularly in the South, on if this is a winning ticket?
I think that symbolism has a place. Like, you know, people get excited about the idea, but I do think that we should never let that push us to not also hold someone accountable and be critical. I have definitely been very, critical of Vice President Kamala Harris and also push folks to be more accountable, because I've seen when people are critical of her and we do hold her accountable, she does shift. And so I do think there's power in both of those things. Yes, it's great to see that a black woman be nominated as the first Democratic nominee for president, but also what is she going to do for us, and is she listening to what we're saying?
All right, this is...
We want to thank Tez, our chief political correspondent, for bringing us all the latest from the DNC. Thank you, Tez, for your incredible reporting. We are back live here in our studio in Atlanta, joined by our panelists and our audience members who've joined us, Sydney and Brittany. Thank you guys so much. We just witnessed VP Harris take the stage and give her much anticipated speech to the Democratic National Convention, where she kind of made her best case for why she's the best person of the job. Right. I want to open it up and ask you guys, first our panelists, and then open it up to our audience members as well. What stood out to you about this speech?
Well, I'm going to be completely honest with you. I expected nothing short of excellence from Vice President Harris, and that's what she gave. She went out there and she showed a pure American life. Mm. She showed courage. She showed her authenticity, and I think that's really what a lot of Americans want to look at. We don't care about how much money you putting in Hillbillyville of Alabama. We want to see, what are you doing? Love you. We want to see what can you do that can connect you to me. Mm-hmm. And that's what the basic voter looks at. And so she did that. And so honestly, just looking at her whole speech overall, she hit a lot of points that every generation has been pointing out. Mm-hmm. She might not have gone as in depth as some people may have wanted on certain cases, but a lot of the topic points that Gen Z wants, millennials, our baby boomers, the people that are actually voting, she hit the points that are very strategic and to the point for them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I agree with you. I think to that point, I think she kind of have a lot of policies in place that she promising the U.S. citizens for each type of citizen, old, young, you know, the liberal, somewhat conservative, you know, like you said, college student, whether you go to PWI or HBCU. I think she know how to like tailor to each person because she's been in our shoes before. She's more like she's the more valid candidate in my opinion because she put in the work.
Did she do anything tonight that made you feel a little more confident in her ability to do the job, or you were the same? You felt like she could do the job?
I learned more about what she's promising to the U.S. citizens today. That's what I felt like. It was different because you know you can look at clips on Instagram or Twitter, and I don't really feed into that because that's not my education source. But now I can actually see what she's saying versus chopped up clips of stuff and then they put it out into the media.
I mean, I want to ask you, do you feel like she did what needed to be done? Do you feel like she made the case that she is the best person for the job and moved the needle, which she was looking to do?
Yeah, so she touched on a lot of things that are relevant to voters today. I think, you know, immigration is a great example of that. And she said what she thinks people want to hear. When you dig into, when you really look at the blunt force reality of it, she talked about immigration. She was the border czar 4 years ago, right? She was it, right? That was her baby. That's when they ran on that, right? And then 2 years or 2.5 years later, you know, there's a report that 10 to 15 million immigrants are in our country, right? She touched on reproductive rights, as did Michelle Obama yesterday. And she touched on IVF. And they keep saying that Donald Trump doesn't want you to have IVF or whatever. And like he's gone on record, you can see the film, it's there, you know, where he says, I want families to have access to IVF. The list goes on and on, you know, all in all, for me, it turns into a matter of why didn't you do it in the last 4 years? And if you disagreed with the president, why not bring that up? She hasn't. Because, quite frankly, the platform doesn't disagree. The platform wants her to run on just what they've done. And so for me, again, not a lot of meat with the potatoes, if that makes any sense.
Interesting. Brittany, I have to ask you, how did you feel that VP Harris did making her case to the American people, and did she make her case to you?
Yeah, one thing that I am the most excited about, because I've been very nervous about the uncommitted voters, she stood 10 toes for Gaza. Like, she said ceasefire, she said the word. And I think that's what a lot of people have been holding their breath for. They've been waiting to hear that. As far as her feeding into the media or just saying what people want to hear, yeah, I want my politician to tell me exactly what I want to hear. Make me feel safe, make me feel hopeful, and make me feel like I have somebody who has the common sense to pass policy that the people want to see.
I want to piggyback off of that. You know, in our community, in the Black community, you know, and this is really for all the listeners, right? There are many scholars that have written to this statement that the measure of an intellectual community, the measure of an intellectual community is not emotion, but rather truth. And sometimes that means that we have to say the things, our politicians do, that we don't want to hear. And so I would look for a leader to tell me the truth. Is what I would look to do. I would look for a leader that has a record in economics. Certainly no one in this room would want to take financial advice from me if I wasn't managing $700 million portfolio. Again, meat with the potatoes. You know, I urge Americans to ask themselves, where are they leading us to? Not what makes me feel comfortable.
Interesting.
Wait, can I respond?
Of course.
I understand you, but to be specific, I want to say something that Martin Luther King brought up, since I am from Montgomery. He spoke to the fact that humans are emotional. That's it. There's no way around it. And people have been playing on our emotions since the inception of this nation. It's part of the core of who we are. And if you don't play to someone's humanity, which is their emotions, you're basically saying you don't matter. And I get it, saying someone is playing to your emotions can be taken negatively, but it's just the fact that humans are emotional beings.
Martin Luther King also said that he felt that he led his people into a burning house in reference to the Democrat Party. Martin Luther King said a lot of things. And yeah, you can go. That's something that you can go look up. but ultimately, again, I defer to the point that relative to our progress in our community, the objective truth and the track record of performance is what Americans, it would behoove us to look at that.
Yeah.
More so than who likes me, doesn't like me.
I just want to fact check really quick, and then
Yeah,
I'll let it go.
Please fact check really quick.
When MLK said that, he wasn't talking about the Democratic Party. He was talking specifically about integration and opposition to Governor Wallace
Yes.
in Alabama.
Okay. Thank you for that, because I was thinking that too, that it wasn't about the Democratic Party specifically. But I do want to touch on an important issue amongst Gen Z and millennials, absolutely, and why we brought more women to the conversation, because I really want us to take the lead on this. If you guys have stuff to add, please defer to the ladies and let us kind of get this conversation rolling. And we have our audience member too, who's going to chime in a sec. But Vice President Harris has been one of the leading voices in support of reproductive rights since the overturning of Roe v. Wade. Our team spoke with advocates on the ground at the DNC. Let's take a quick look.
I know firsthand, I lost a son at 32 weeks because I had preeclampsia. So it's more than just abortion. It's about women's ability to survive the birthing process if they so choose it.
They are not holding back when it comes to attacks on black bodies. And policing our bodies is no different on the street than it is in the doctor's office.
It's also your ability to not have children, access to birth control, access to pregnancy prevention, and it's the ability to survive afterwards and take care of your children afterwards, which means we have postpartum care. We have access to adequate public education. We have access to public health care systems. We need all those things if we really want to be pro-life.
So I want to open it up to you guys. What are your views on this issue of reproductive rights? And, what do you feel like needs to be protected kind of under that umbrella?
I am very pro-choice, but I think in being pro-choice, I am also pro-life, because letting a woman have full access to health care may save her life, may save the baby's life. So I think the two and two actually go hand in hand.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just from my standpoint, as a person that experienced, like she said, it's other issues outside of just having a baby and getting pregnant and having an abortion, but just our reproductive system is being attacked right now through the food that we're eating, and FDA approving it. And we having fibroids grow on our uterus, we have cysts on our ovaries, and we can't have the access to health care to help us in those situations without taking that uterus. That's the #1 thing they offer and recommend. They want to take your right for you to have a baby. And nobody's speaking about it. And black women are being highly affected by this at a higher rate than other races.
Well, I do want to speak on something that you mentioned, which is, infertility, PCOS, issues with the reproductive process due to the toxic nature of feminine sanitary products. That study came out earlier this year that majority of the feminine care products all women use are toxic and harmful for the body. So
that's right.
Yes, there are protections that can be taken that don't just have to do with the right to access abortion or the Plan B pill, but more so, protections in place for us to be healthy and use products that we use every day.
That's right. Non-chemical. Plant-based. We need that. We need natural products.
I understand what you're saying. I do want to open it up to our audience member.
Yeah, everybody likes my opinion on this.
No. I want to open it to the. I don't want to leave the men out, but I just want to give the women a chance to express, because it directly affects us.
I agree.
Thank you.
Women,
Thank you. Okay, but hold it, because I'm gonna come back to you.
Okay.
Hi, I'm from California. I resonate a lot with VP Harris because I'm from the Bay Area myself. I'm from the Flats. In 2010, when people losing their homes for foreclosure. I was one of those homes. 16 years old, I had an abortion, and I was able to get health care provided for me, Planned Parenthood, for free, along with birth control. I was able to go to college for free. I'm a teacher. I'm a social worker here in Atlanta, and I see the kids suffering, mental health-wise. For me, I heard what Donald Trump had said mental health. It wasn't good enough for me, honestly. I heard he said my sorority said I had a party in Houston where we're getting his business done, helping Black and brown women and communities thrive. So for me, I resonate with VP Harris on a personal identity level that I think a lot of Gen Z and millennials do too. So personally for me, it's not about who's red, who's blue. It's about who's person, who's gonna be the best voice for me and my future generation to come. Because as a teacher, I see the kids suffering, and it's ridiculous. Prisons being built, there's nothing helping the kids or the teachers combat the burnt out. We're trying to raise the future. That's all I got to say about that.
Thank you. I really appreciate you sharing that, because I feel like, you know, the testimonies and the stories that we've seen throughout the DNC of women talking about their experiences with abortion, whether it be, you know, extreme medical intervention or, God forbid, horrible, horrible abuse. But I hate that it's only almost acceptable
trauma
if it's in extreme circumstances or your life is in danger. When I think what our sister came up and said is, you know, it's a difference between quality of life, you know? And I think that's an important distinction that we should be talking about. And it doesn't have to be, you know, in these extremes. You don't have to be losing your life. You don't, you know, you don't have to be contending with something horrific for you to make this choice between your doctor and you and your God, if that's what you believe in, you know? And I think that that spectrum of choice is important. So I wonder if any of you in the audience feel a particular way about this, or you guys on the panel. I want to open it up to you now as well.
I want to start off by saying that there are 49 million Black Americans today. From 1972 to now, we've aborted somewhere around 20 to 25 million children. And for me, our society is better off with those children than not. That said, there's a degree to which a female needs to have a choice, like you mentioned, some of those circumstances that you mentioned just now. But I think it's a very tough situation that that women are in today relative to this choice that they need to make as it relates to voting for the next president of the United States. There's someone who is saying that, hey, I want to unanimously codify or reverse the Supreme Court decision that was made under the Trump administration. I would say to the women in this room and to the ones that are listening that Barack Obama, under his 2 terms, tried to do the same, and Democrats wouldn't vote for it. And the Biden administration could have brought Supreme Court justices in that were pro-choice, and they didn't do it. I think that the only reason that this matter is coming around every 4 years is because it is used to divide the community and to divide the vote. The reality in this situation is no different than reparations, like I know you want to talk about.
We'll get to that.
If Democrats wanted to do it, they would have done it already, and they haven't. And so I would just challenge that, you know, I'm in corporate America, and if I don't deliver the year-over-year goals, okay, I'm terminated. And we've been voting for a party almost unanimously for 60 years as a group. And at some point, we have to decide to terminate. And this is one of those issues that, if we objectively look at it, I think is it should get us to the goal line.
I'm gonna jump in here. I think, again, we're not understanding the basic voter, right? And so when you give us those numbers and those stats, How many of those are actual voters that actually know what's going on? How many of those can sit on this panel with us now and be like,
it's irrelevant.
No.
You asked me a question. It's an irrelevant
I was making a statement, so I'm going to finish my statement. Then I'll let you rebuttal. No. I wasn't giving you a question. I was stating my point.
Rhetorical question.
For you. However, the simple fact is, one, pro-choice, 1,000%. Because personally, as a man, I'm not going to tell no woman what to do with her body, number one. Nor do I think a government should tell you what to do with your body. But it's the simple fact that y'all know things about y'all's bodies that we don't. So how can we sit here and say, oh, you can't have a baby. Oh, we're going to take this away. We're not going to support your bills, the medicine you need, all the care that you need to take care of yourself, and then try to take it away and say, oh, no, that's us. We're going to take care of that. You see what I'm saying? And then you also have to look at the simple fact that a lot of women can't financially take care of a baby and themselves. I personally, being how I've been raised, I wouldn't bring another child into this world, and I can't financially take care of them. I don't want my child in the cold.
Yeah, so I'm going to stand on business.
And that's
as a
the
masculine,
problem.
heterosexual black male. And this is going to be an uncomfortable truth, but I don't mind to say this. I am very much for women, not just black women, but all women, aligning with the idea that it should be a tough decision to have sex with a man that they're not married, for example, not married to. That's a tough decision to make, but it's one that holds us all accountable, if that makes any sense. So
that's between them and God.
When we get out of the medical issues, right? When we get away from the medical issues, incest and all these other things that certainly a woman needs to have to make a decision on. When we get out of that, the reality is that there's a certain degree of degradation to our greater society when we embrace things that are not aligned with the historical religious beliefs that benefited our community. That's a reality. That's a reality.
Can we backtrack for a second?
Absolutely.
I want to speak in fact and not theory. So Barack Obama never had the chance to nominate someone to the Supreme Court because Ruth Bader Ginsburg, God rest her soul, hung on. She clung until the very last minute. And then the next president who was able to fill her spot and others, they did what they wanted to do. And so anytime Democrats have had the chance to protect Roe v. Wade, they've done it. And that's literally a fact that you can look up. But also, this just feeds into the hypocrisy, again, of the Republican Party, because you tell me, oh, not to play into my emotions, but then you go, oh, the babies, we're so worried about the babies, we have to save the babies. You freak out when someone tells you to wear a mask because COVID is killing millions of people, and you tell the government, hey, you don't tell me to put on a mask, but you tell someone what to do with their uterus, what to do with their body. Is it Uchiwali? Is it one mic? Like, help me out.
No, I was thinking about that too, because, you know, if it is about protecting the children, you know, ensuring that the children are, you know, raised with these values and stuff, what do we say to the children who are raised in homes where their parents don't want them, or, you know, they can't afford to take care of them, like you were saying, Jaden. You know, these kids are going to school, and I feel like too it's almost a Republican thing that they don't want to feed the kids in school, so the parents can't feed them at home. They come to school, they can't get meals at school. So do we want to take care of the children, or are we obsessed with policing women's bodies and just policing people's decisions in general? That's really my question.
Yes.
Policing.
Full stop.
That's what they want.
You guys, does anyone else have any feelings about that? Strong feelings? I know this is, please, yes. I felt like I could. I felt it. I felt the pull. Please make your way over to the mic. Yeah. What's your name, please?
My name is Sade Areshagun. I'm actually a counselor at a prison. So a lot of experience working with underserved communities, of course. And I really just want to kind of summarize what I kind of hear you guys saying, I think, a little bit. we can ask these rhetorical questions about, if the country would have been better with these 25 million kids and things like that, right? But I think the real reality is we want children to grow up in happy homes, stable homes, safe homes, all that good stuff that hopefully all you guys had growing up that made you who you are today, or maybe things that you had to overcome, right? But the bottom line is, if a woman doesn't want to have a child, can we reasonably deduce that maybe she wouldn't be the best mother at that time for whatever reason it may be? And we want these kids to have loving mothers, present mothers, healthy mothers, mentally stable mothers, right? And if they don't get that because a mother was forced into a situation that she wasn't ready for whatever reason it is, we could talk about the reasons all day, but that may not be the best environment for that child to grow up in. So
yeah,
that's all we have to say.
Thank
really.
you, thank you for sharing that.
It's a tough decision, right? It's difficult to advise, but I would advise my brothers and sisters to avoid premarital sex, is what I would say, because of the idea that you could end up bringing a child into this world out of wedlock, and quite frankly, that oftentimes children born under those circumstances are at a disadvantage. I mean, we know that, right? But ultimately, religion and so many other things will weigh in, and my opinion is definitely one that's pro-life for sure.
Well, I appreciate all of you guys, being candid and open about this topic and, getting into the weeds of it. Obviously, we can discuss this for however much longer, but I do want to address something that the audience had brought up in our YouTube comments, and they were really interested to hear about how you all felt about reparations. Where's the stance on that? Apparently, that is a huge issue top of mind of our community. What would that look like? I want to start with Jaden and go around.
Yeah, so honestly, starting back with reparations, 40 acres and a mule, and we recognize as a community that we never received that, some of us. However, we've seen countless times that multiple Democrats at a state level have tried to push for reparations. Even the governor of California, he's still constantly pushing it. But one of the biggest things that we see at a federal level, national level, is that they are still looking for ways, Democrats, to push for reparations through subcommittees, to bring it back to the floor, because they know it can't pass unless everybody's happy. And so what I believe that we still can get reparations, but in order for us to receive it, we have to redefine it.
Yes.
It's a new time, it's a new era, it's a new look. And so in order for us to receive, I don't want a mule, to be honest. You can keep the mule.
I can't have a mule in my apartment.
Yeah. So how can we define or reevaluate it to today? Whether that's property, land, whether that's financial, whether it's just some form of benefit. And we realize our community, Black community specifically, we've never received reparations, but the Jewish communities receive reparations. The Chinese, the Vietnamese communities receive reparations. A whole bunch of people shoot. But it's always been over billions of dollars that they've received that's been dispersed individually. And we're not talking about to groups. We're not talking about to actual organizations. We're talking individual people receiving checks like a stimulus. But the only person who's been hurt the most by this country has yet to receive that reparation. So we have to redefine it.
I think it's interesting that the Chicago pushed, I think as of today, I think it's 100 million, right? They pushed 100 million into supporting migrants, illegal immigrants, whatever you want to call them, here in the year of 2024, $100 million. Outside of the advice of Republicans. Republicans protested it, as they have continued to do across the United States, in every state. Democrats can give 100 million to immigrants, but they stand on the idea that they can't give Black Americans reparations because Republicans are in the way. Republicans aren't in the way relative to giving you, in contradiction to the opinion of the voters in Chicago, There's no issue with them giving it to you then, or giving it to them, but there's an issue with giving it to you. The reality is, and I don't think that anybody on this panel today would be surprised if I said I don't support reparations. But the idea is that, you know, my idea as a black American who has left the Democrat Party is that it's just one more carrot that's dangled to separate you from the positive things in another party and to create a degree of hope for something that they're never going to give you in any way. California is almost all Democrat-led. If they wanted you to have that money, you'd have it. It's simple. The reality is that within the party, the vast majority of the Americans in that party are not black Americans. And those that are not black Americans don't support you having reparations. And that's something that I think today black Americans need to be apprised of.
Basically, what I just got from what you said was that black people need to get in more elected offices so that we can make the effective change. I heard the stats, but the stats were basically, to sum the story for black America, go run for office and make some change.
Well, you manage all the offices in your communities.
Don't need to manage.
You manage all the offices
the
in your
community is
communities,
represented by the people in the community. That's how a community functions.
Reparations. Was it Brandon Jackson in Chicago? Is that the gentleman's name? Brandon Jackson. I think he's the mayor.
He just got in, not even a year ago.
Brandon Jackson was the one who had to get on television and tell his constituents that he was going to push this money into these immigrants. The constituents that look like me and you were screaming up and down and protesting, and he got to run to the car because he know he can't go back and tell his white liberal overseer that he's going to do anything different. That's a reality. That's a reality. And so I would recommend it for the people listening to understand the game that's leveraged against you.
What do you mean by that?
People putting things in front of you that they know you're interested in with no intention to give them to you is a game. That's the point that I'm making. That's the point that I'm making.
And the Republican Party has done that multiple times.
I'm just saying.
Well, I think we can say that.
As it relates to,
I think we can say that for the political process
giving immigrants the money in Chicago, but they did it anyway, and they did it in New York, and they're doing it in LA.
I want to get Brittany and Sydney's opinion on this. Yes. You know, you being from Alabama, kind of talk about the sentiment of that. Is that something that the community there is wanting or searching for, or?
So I will say this, and I will keep it as cute as possible. To say that Republicans have not been a blocking force to reparations is fundamentally untrue. Anytime we have been given any type of government,
I said that Democrats tell you that they can't overcome the challenge of giving you reparations because of Republicans, but they can overcome the challenge of providing immigrants the money.
Oh, okay, great.
And they can do that in no time.
So what I was saying was that
in no time.
Anytime black Americans have been given anything, it's been called a handout. We've been called welfare babies. We've been called all of these things. So, like I said, let's speak in fact and never theory. It would be nearly impossible. Black people don't even do the census most of the time. So to take a head count of every single black American who is a descendant of African slaves living on this land now, nearly impossible, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And so as he was saying, we can't look at it as 40 acres and a mule anymore. We can't look at it as money anymore. Maybe it can be real estate. Maybe we can start going to college for free. Maybe we can start getting, instead of business loans, you just tell me like, hey, you go through this process and you tell me this is a business that will last more than 10 years. Let's try it out. Let's see it. In Montgomery specifically, we have a black mayor, but our city councilmen, county commissioners, school board, these are people who are not black. So he can be a figurehead for the city and it looks great.
Yeah.
But when it comes down to who is the deciding factor on who gets what, it's never us. And that's Republican, Democrat, Tea Party, Green Party, whomever. So
yeah, thank you for that. Yeah,
I agree with both of them. Just modernizing it and tailor it with education, resources, and land. You know, to be able to build wealth, because when we get the wealth, you know, we truly don't own it. We don't pay our taxes. So the government is always in position to take back. That's the part we gotta really vote on. That's the part that they're not gonna put as like, can we vote on them actually not taxing black people anymore? We don't.
You know what? You know what? I think Jade. Yeah, no, we definitely paying our taxes. We gotta pay our taxes.
Real estate. I'm sorry, real estate taxes.
Yeah.
We're gonna pay taxes to publicly fund, you know, the education, of course, our elementary schools, middle school, high schools, even college. But the real estate is what we're losing at, because that's equity for us to build commercial buildings and actually have like an economic development in our neighborhood that we own. If we continue to let the government take the property, or the county, because that's who takes it from you, when you don't pay your taxes. They make it really, really unbearable for people like the grandmamas, disabled, elderly, seniors, to be in position to leave something, to have something sustainable. Like she said, sustainable business is most important, because you want something that sustains. So yes, why can't we have access to capital if we're sustainable? Yeah. If we've been in business 10, 15 years, instead of, you know, like your credit score. We still on that?
Yeah.
And they haven't changed it since they invented the credit score. I mean, the credit score was, the Fair Credit Reporting Act was invented in the early 2000s, so it's fairly new, but they haven't changed it at all. But you
it really is from the top down, I think. You know, a lot of things need to be taken into account. Our audience member at the mic, do you mind giving us your name and your remarks?
Yes, hi, my name is Tiara. So when it comes to the topic of reparations, the first thing that comes to mind is when I learned that reparations were actually paid out, they were paid out to the slave owners. And that was the reparations that America discussed when reparations were first coming into conversation. And then I also think about at the same time, if y'all seen the episode of Atlanta, when they were paying out the reparations and they were pulling up on folks, taking their cars out. And I think it's just imagining it in as many different aspects as we can. I like that you brought up education. I think of the Gates Millennium Scholarship, for example. You have to be a person of color to receive that scholarship. That could technically be a form of reparations, or just the idea of we can imagine it in so many different aspects where it's not necessarily like somebody's dangling something in front of you. It's tangible, it's real. It's just a matter of having those necessary and serious conversations to get to the point where we're accomplishing something that makes sense for everyone. But I think just having an open mind and being imaginative of what those reparations can look like in different forms allows us to get on the path of actually receiving them. But I'm all for it, the Atlanta style of reparations. You know, if we could figure out who was actually owning and just go up and pull up and take their stuff, I'm with that too.
You know,
but, you know.
You know what, Tia, I really appreciate your input, and I appreciate you kind of wrapping it up for us in a way that is hopeful and optimistic, and, you know, brings it back around to the stuff that's important to us. Education, you know, those systems in place to support our growth and, you know, forward movement. So I really appreciate that. I know it's about time to wrap it up. Thank you all for spending this time with me. I'd like to thank my esteemed panelists for joining me. I'd like to thank Tez, doing incredible work on the ground at the DNC. We appreciate you. Debate night, September 10th. Tez will be back. It will be crazy. You guys do not want to miss it. So keep it locked here for Revolt, for all of your election needs. We're here for you guys. So thank you for spending tonight with us. We'll see you next time. Good night, everybody.